Along the life-giving banks of the Nile, where golden sands meet fertile black soil, one of humanity's most enduring mythological traditions took root and flourished for over 3,000 years. Egyptian mythology stands as a monumental achievement of human imagination, a complex tapestry of divine beings, cosmic battles, and profound wisdom that continues to captivate us millennia after the last hieroglyphs were carved. Unlike many ancient belief systems that have faded into obscurity, Egyptian mythology maintains a powerful presence in our collective consciousness. The striking imagery of falcon-headed gods, the mysteries of the pyramids, and the allure of the afterlife journey have permeated literature, film, art, and popular culture across the globe. This enduring fascination is no accident. Egyptian myths speak to fundamental human concerns about creation, order versus chaos, mortality, and the possibility of life beyond death. Egyptian mythology didn't emerge fully formed, but evolved over vast stretches of time, beginning around 3100 BCE with the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under the first pharaoh. This mythology continued developing through the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom, and beyond, even absorbing elements of Greek and Roman thought during the later Ptolemaic period. The geography of Egypt profoundly shaped its mythology. The predictable annual flooding of the Nile, which brought fertile silt to an otherwise harsh desert landscape, inspired the Egyptians' emphasis on cycles, renewal, and the restoration of order. This natural phenomenon became mirrored in mythic cycles, like the daily journey of the sun, god Ra, and the death and resurrection of Osiris. Egyptian mythology was not preserved in a single canonical text like the Bible or the Iliad. Instead, it exists in fragmentary form across thousands of inscriptions, papyri, tomb paintings, temple reliefs, and funerary objects. The pyramid texts from the Old Kingdom, coffin texts from the Middle Kingdom, and Book of the Dead from the New Kingdom provide our most comprehensive sources, but even these primarily focus on afterlife beliefs rather than offering complete mythological narratives. Archaeological evidence reveals that Egyptian myths weren't static, but underwent significant transformations over time. Gods merged, split, or changed attributes. Creation stories varied by region, and foreign deities were periodically absorbed into the pantheon. What remained constant was the Egyptians' commitment to maintaining Ma'at, the fundamental concept of truth, balance, and cosmic order. For ancient Egyptians, mythology wasn't an abstract collection of stories, but a living reality that permeated every aspect of existence. The pharaoh wasn't merely a political ruler, but the living embodiment of Horus, maintaining cosmic order through ritual actions. Temples weren't just buildings, but horizon houses where heaven met earth, requiring precise daily rituals to sustain the gods who, in turn, sustained creation itself. Ordinary citizens engaged with mythology through public festivals, celebrating events like the annual flooding of the Nile associated with the tears of Isis, or the return of the goddess Hathor from Nubia, marking the beginning of the inundation season. Household shrines honored deities like Bez and Taweret, who protected families from dangers ranging from venomous creatures to complications in childbirth. Even medicine and magic were inseparable from mythology. Healing practices often involved recitations identifying the patient with Horus and the healer with Thoth or Isis, drawing on divine precedent to overcome illness, which was frequently attributed to malevolent supernatural forces. Amulets shaped like the Eye of Horus protected against misfortune, while scarab beetles symbolized the sun god's regenerative power. Egyptian mythology provided explanations for natural phenomena, justified social hierarchies, offered comfort regarding mortality, and established behavioral standards through stories of divine judgment. Yet it would be a mistake to view these myths as mere primitive attempts to explain the unexplainable. The sophisticated Egyptian priesthood was capable of abstract theological thinking, often presenting the same divine powers through multiple symbolic forms and narratives that operated on several levels of meaning simultaneously. As we embark on this exploration of Egyptian mythology, we'll encounter a worldview both alien and surprisingly familiar. We'll meet gods with animal heads who nonetheless experience recognizably human emotions. We'll witness creation myths that anticipate scientific concepts by thousands of years. We'll explore a vision of the afterlife so compelling that it influenced subsequent religious traditions. The ancient Egyptians created one of history's longest-lasting civilizations, a culture that maintained remarkable continuity while adapting to changing circumstances. Their mythology similarly balanced conservatism with innovation, preserving core concepts while responding to political, social, and intellectual developments across 3 millennia. Though the last temple to the Egyptian gods closed nearly 1,700 years ago, and the ability to read hieroglyphs was lost until the Rosetta Stone's decipherment in the 19th century, Egyptian mythology never truly died. It lives on, not just in museum exhibitions and scholarly works, but in our ongoing fascination with its profound symbolism and eternal themes. As we journey through this mythological landscape, we'll discover why these ancient stories continue to resonate in our modern world, offering insights into both the Egyptian mind and our shared human condition. In the beginning, before there were gods or humans, before the earth and sky existed, there was only none, the dark, formless, infinite ocean of primordial chaos. From these primordial waters, all creation would emerge, though how this happened varied according to where in Egypt one asked the question. The ancient Egyptians, unlike many other cultures, maintained multiple creation accounts simultaneously, each associated with a powerful cult center and each emphasizing different aspects of cosmic origins. Rather than competing or contradicting each other, these creation myths were seen as complementary perspectives on a mystery too profound for any single narrative to capture. Most prominent among these creation accounts was the Heliopolitan cosmogony, developed by the priests of Heliopolis, the ancient city of the sun. According to their teachings, the creator deity Atum arose from the chaotic waters of Nun through an act of self-creation. In some versions, the creator emerged upon the primeval mound, the first piece of solid ground to rise from the floodwaters, a powerful image drawn from the annual receding of the Nile's inundation. In others, this primal god took the form of the Benben stone, a pyramid-shaped object that symbolized the first rays of sunlight breaking through darkness. However he first appeared, this self-created deity found himself alone in the cosmos, being complete within himself, containing both male and female aspects. He was able to produce children without a partner. In a particularly vivid version of the myth, the creator took his phallus in his hand and through an act of divine masturbation, brought forth his first 2 children, Shu, god of air and dryness, and Tefnut, goddess of moisture. These deities emerged either from the divine semen or, in other versions, from the creator's sneeze and saliva, bodily fluids serving as symbols of divine creative power. Upon their creation, Shu and Tefnut became separated from their father in the dark waters of Nun. Grieving for his lost children, the creator sent his eye, later associated with the goddess Hathor, to search for them. Upon their joyful reunion, his tears of happiness fell to earth and transformed into the first human beings. This touching mythic episode reveals a characteristic Egyptian belief that humanity originated from divine substance, not as slaves to the gods, but as beings related to them through shared essence. Shu and Tefnut, the first divine couple, mated to produce the next generation of gods. Geb, the earth god, and Nut, the sky goddess. These deities were initially joined in a tight embrace, with Nut arched over Geb in cosmic union. Their father Shu then separated them, lifting Nut high above to form the vault of heaven and forcing Geb to lie beneath as the earth. The space between became our world, the realm of air and atmosphere ruled by Shu. Despite their forced separation, Geb and Nut managed to conceive 5 children before being permanently parted. Osiris, Isis, Set, Nephthys, and sometimes Horus the Elder. These 5 deities, together with their ancestors, formed the great Ennead of Heliopolis, the 9 primary gods who would shape Egyptian religion for millennia. The complex relationships, conflicts, and alliances among these deities would generate the rich mythological narratives that defined Egyptian spiritual imagination. A dramatically different creation account developed in Hermopolis, where priests honored the Ogdoad, 8 primordial deities who predated creation itself. These gods existed as 4 complementary pairs of male and female entities, each pair representing different aspects of the pre-creation chaos. Nun and Naunet, the primordial waters. Amun and Amunet, hiddenness and invisibility. Her and Hauhet, infinity and eternity. And Kek and Kauket, darkness. These 8 gods, typically depicted with frog and serpent heads to symbolize their primitive pre-creation nature, were believed to have combined their powers to create the cosmic egg, from which the sun god emerged upon the primeval mound. In this version, the first light of creation appeared when this cosmic egg hatched, releasing the sun god, often identified as Ra, Khepri, or Thoth, depending on the specific tradition. Some versions of the myth claimed that a celestial bird, perhaps an ibis, falcon, or the Bennu bird, Egyptian phoenix, laid this egg upon the mound, rising from the waters. The moment of hatching marked the first sunrise, the beginning of time, and the birth of ordered existence from primordial chaos. In Memphis, yet another creation theology developed, one that emphasized the intellectual rather than physical generation of the universe. According to the Memphite theology, preserved on the Shabaka stone, the creator god Ptah brought the world into being through the power of his heart, mind, and tongue, speech. By conceiving the universe in his mind and speaking it into existence, Ptah created not just physical reality, but also abstract concepts, divine principles, and cultural institutions. This sophisticated creation account presented Ptah as the ultimate source even of the other creator gods like Atum. The Memphite priests claimed that Ptah had conceived the Ennead in his heart and called them into being with his commanding voice. This creation, through divine speech, strikingly anticipates the Logos concept in later Greek and Judeo-Christian thought, suggesting the profound philosophical depth of Egyptian theology at its most abstract. While these 3 major cosmogonies, Heliopolitan, Hermopolitan, and Memphite, dominated Egyptian creation mythology, numerous other local traditions flourished throughout the land. In Elephantine, at Egypt's southern border, the ram-headed creator, god Khnum, was believed to fashion humans on his potter's wheel from clay taken from the Nile. In Esna, the goddess Neith was credited with weaving creation into existence as a divine craftswoman. In Thebes, during the New Kingdom, Amun rose to prominence as a creation deity, eventually merging with Ra to become Amun-Ra, king of the gods. Across these varied creation accounts, certain themes consistently emerge. Creation always begins with formless waters and darkness. A primeval mound provides the first solid ground. The creator deity is typically self-generated, arising from nothingness through their own power. Creation itself is not a single act, but an ongoing process that must be continually maintained against the forces of chaos that threaten to reclaim the ordered cosmos. Most tellingly, Egyptian creation myths never include a notion of creation from nothing. Instead, the creator gods organize, separate, and transform pre-existing chaotic elements into ordered reality. Creation is not making something from nothing, but imposing meaningful structure upon formlessness. This concept reflects the Egyptian experience of their own environment, where agriculture depended on channeling and controlling the Nile's floodwaters to create fertile fields from muddy inundation. The multiplicity of Egyptian creation myths might seem confusing to modern minds, accustomed to seeking single, definitive explanations. Yet this theological flexibility allowed Egyptian religion to evolve over 3 millennia while maintaining its essential character. Different creator gods could be syncretized, their stories harmonized, and their symbolic meanings layered without requiring the rejection of previous traditions. This intellectual approach, seeing complementary truths in apparently different accounts, reveals a sophisticated religious sensibility that recognized the limitations of any single explanation for the ultimate mystery of existence. From the primordial waters and divine acts of creation emerged a pantheon of deities more diverse and numerous than almost any other ancient civilization. The Egyptians themselves claimed there were 42,042 gods, an obviously symbolic number suggesting limitless divine manifestations. These weren't simply personifications of natural forces, but complex personalities with intricate relationships, shifting attributes, and multifaceted roles that evolved over millennia of Egyptian history. At the center of this divine assembly stood Ra, the sun god, whose daily journey across the sky in his solar bark represented the most visible and vital cosmic pattern. Depicted with a falcon's head crowned by the solar disk, Ra embodied light, warmth, and life-giving energy. As creator and king of the gods, Ra ruled from his celestial throne, maintaining Ma'at, the fundamental order of the universe. Each morning, Ra would be born anew in the east as Khepri, the scarab-headed god of the rising sun. At midday, he reached the height of his power as Ra, and in the evening he became Atum, the setting sun, preparing for his nighttime journey through the underworld. This cycle of rebirth made Ra the perfect symbol of eternal renewal, a concept central to Egyptian thought. No deity better embodied this principle of renewal than Osiris, lord of the underworld and judge of the dead. Originally a god of fertility associated with the life-giving Nile, Osiris achieved cosmic significance through his death and resurrection. When he was murdered by his jealous brother Set, the god of chaos and desert storms, Osiris became the first mummy and the model for all who hope to overcome death. His green skin in Egyptian art symbolized vegetation and rebirth, while his distinctive crown with tall plumes represented his royal authority over the realm of the dead. As ruler of the afterlife, Osiris offered the promise that death was not the end, but a transition to another state of existence. No tale of Osiris is complete without mentioning his devoted wife Isis, perhaps Egypt's most versatile and influential goddess. Renowned for her magical powers and cunning intelligence, Isis reconstructed her husband's dismembered body, conceived their son Horus posthumously, and protected him through a dangerous childhood. Her tenacity and resourcefulness made her the model of perfect wifehood and motherhood. while her magical knowledge gave her dominion over healing and protection. Depicted with a throne hieroglyph on her head, her name literally means throne. Isis embodied royal power and divine queenship. Her cult would eventually spread throughout the Mediterranean world, becoming one of the most popular religions of the Roman Empire. The divine child of Isis and Osiris, Horus, represented legitimacy and rightful succession, concepts critical to a civilization obsessed with continuity. Typically portrayed with a falcon's head, Horus began as a sky god whose eyes represented the sun and moon. After his father's murder, Horus engaged in a cosmic struggle with his uncle Set that lasted 80 years. This conflict between order and chaos, fertility and barrenness, legacy and usurpation, ended with Horus's victory and coronation, establishing the pattern for all earthly succession. Every living pharaoh was considered the embodiment of Horus, while each deceased king became one with Osiris, creating an eternal cycle of royal regeneration. Set, often misunderstood as a simple villain, played a more complex role in Egyptian religion. As god of deserts, storms, disorder, and foreign lands, Set represented necessary but dangerous forces. His murder of Osiris and battle with Horus earned him a fearsome reputation, yet the Egyptians recognized that his chaotic energy was essential to the cosmos. Set protected Ra's solar boat against the serpent of chaos, Apophis, demonstrating that even destructive power could serve higher purposes. During certain periods, particularly when foreign dynasties ruled Egypt, Set received elevated worship. His red hair and distinctive animal head, possibly an aardvark or imaginary beast, becoming emblems of formidable strength rather than evil. Among the most visually distinctive Egyptian deities was Anubis, the jackal-headed god of mummification and protector of tombs. His association with jackals, which haunted cemeteries in ancient times, transformed a feared scavenger into a divine guardian. With his jet-black skin symbolizing the fertile soil and resurrection, Anubis guided the deceased through the afterlife journey. He performed the crucial role of weighing the heart of the deceased against the feather of Mawat, determining who merited eternal life. Anubis's careful attention to proper funerary procedures made him the patron of embalmers, whose sacred work transformed perishable bodies into eternal vessels for the soul. The ibis-headed Thoth stood as Egypt's god of wisdom, writing, and magic, essentially the divine intellect. As scribe of the gods, he recorded the judgment of the dead, invented hieroglyphics, authored mystical texts, and calculated the days of the year. His association with the moon complemented Ra's solar dominion, providing measure and rhythm to time itself. Thoth's intervention often resolved divine conflicts through his words rather than weapons, demonstrating the power of knowledge over force. Revered by scribes and magicians alike, Thoth embodied the Egyptian belief that literacy and magical expertise were intertwined paths to power. Few goddesses inspired more contradictory emotions than Hathor, deity of love, beauty, music, and joy, who could transform into the bloodthirsty lioness Sekhmet when provoked. In her benevolent aspect, cow-headed Hathor welcomed the dead to the afterlife with nourishment from her divine milk. She brought intoxication through beer and wine, ecstasy through music and dance, and fulfillment through sexuality and motherhood. Yet when Ra unleashed her as Sekhmet to punish human rebellion, she nearly destroyed humanity in a bloodlust that the gods themselves struggled to contain. This dual nature made Hathor a powerful reminder that creative and destructive forces often spring from the same divine source. Balancing Hathor's passionate intensity was Maat, the goddess who personified cosmic order, truth, and justice. Unlike the dramatic narratives surrounding other deities, Ma'at rarely featured in myths as an active character. Instead, she embodied an abstract principle so fundamental that all creation depended on it. Depicted as a woman with an ostrich feather on her head, Ma'at represented the ideal state of existence, harmonious, balanced, and righteous. Pharaohs claimed to rule according to Ma'at, while the deceased hoped their hearts would balance against her feather in the judgment hall. Without Ma'at, the Egyptians believed, the cosmos would dissolve back into primordial chaos. Beyond these major figures existed a vast array of lesser deities governing every aspect of life. Household gods like Bez, a dwarf deity with a lion's mane who protected women in childbirth and children from nightmares, and Taweret, the pregnant hippopotamus goddess who safeguarded mothers, brought divine protection into the homes of ordinary Egyptians. Local gods like Sobek, the crocodile deity of the Fayum, or Khnum, ram-headed potter of Elephantine, commanded intense regional devotion. Personifications of abstract concepts included Shai, fate, Renenutet, harvest abundance, and Heka, magical power. What made Egyptian religion particularly fluid was the practice of syncretism, the merging of deities who shared attributes or functions. Amun, originally an obscure air god, rose to national prominence after Thebes became the capital, eventually merging with Ra to become Amun-Ra, king of the gods. Similarly, goddesses frequently combined into composite forms like Mut-Sekhmet Bastet, representing different aspects of divine feminine power. Rather than creating theological confusion, these combinations demonstrated the Egyptian understanding that divine reality could manifest in multiple, complementary forms simultaneously. The animal associations of Egyptian gods have often been misunderstood as primitive animal worship. In reality, they represented a sophisticated symbolic system. The gods weren't animals, but transcendent beings whose complex attributes could be expressed through animal symbolism. The falcon's keen vision and swift flight perfectly captured Horus's watchful sovereignty. The ibis's probing bill suggested Thoth's penetrating intellect. These animal features, combined with human bodies, created visual theology, instantly recognizable divine attributes in a pre-literate society. Each deity maintained special cult centers, where their presence was believed to manifest most powerfully. Ra was worshipped at Heliopolis, Osiris at Abydos, Ptah at Memphis, Amun at Thebes, and Isis at Philae. These temples weren't merely places of worship, but mansions of the gods, where daily rituals sustained cosmic order. Priests performed elaborate ceremonies, washing, feeding, and clothing. Divine statues believed to house the god's K, spiritual essence. Through these rituals, humans participated in maintaining creation itself, becoming essential participants in cosmic continuity. The Egyptian gods were neither distant abstractions nor simplistic personifications. They existed in a complex divine society that mirrored and transcended human experience. Through myth, ritual, art, and architecture, the Egyptians developed relationships with these divine powers, seeing in them both the patterns of natural forces and models for human potential. These gods, sometimes majestic, sometimes approachable, always multifaceted, provided a framework for understanding existence that sustained Egyptian civilization for 3,000 years. Among all the narratives woven through Egyptian mythology, none held greater significance than the story of Osiris, a tale of betrayal, devotion, vengeance, and resurrection that profoundly shaped Egyptian concepts of kingship, afterlife, and cosmic order. Unlike many Egyptian myths known only through fragmentary references, the Osiris cycle has come down to us in relatively complete form, primarily through Plutarch's account in his work, on Isis and Osiris, supplemented by numerous Egyptian textual and artistic sources spanning 3 millennia. The saga begins in Egypt's primordial past, when gods still walked the earth as rulers. Osiris, son of Gabe, earth, and Nut, sky, became Egypt's first king, inheriting the throne from his divine ancestors. Far from being a distant sovereign, Osiris proved himself a cultural hero who transformed Egyptian society. He taught humans the arts of agriculture, established religious practices, gave them laws, and introduced the cultivation of grain and grape. Under his benevolent guidance, Egypt flourished in a golden age without hunger, warfare, or injustice, a time when Ma'at reigned supreme. By his side ruled Isis, his sister wife, whose wisdom and magical powers complemented Osiris's gentle strength. Together, they embodied the ideal divine couple, bringing prosperity to the land and serving as models for human marriages. Their harmonious reign, however, awakened the jealousy of their brother Set, whose complex motivations blended personal ambition, resentment of Osiris's popularity, and desire for Isis. Some later interpretations suggested a cosmic dimension to this rivalry. Set, as Lord of the Desert, naturally opposed Osiris, who represented the fertile Nile and its life-giving annual flood. Set's murderous plot unfolded at a lavish banquet, to which he invited Osiris and 72 conspirators. During the festivities, Set presented an exquisitely crafted chest, announcing that he would gift it to whomever it fit perfectly. One by one, the guests tried the chest without success. When Osiris's turn came, he lay down inside, not realizing the chest had been precisely measured to his body. The moment Osiris reclined inside, Set and his co-conspirators slammed the lid shut, sealed it with molten lead, and cast it into the Nile. Thus died Osiris, victim of history's first recorded fratricide, a death that would transform him from an earthly king to the lord of the afterlife. Upon learning of her husband's murder, Isis was consumed by grief, yet determined to recover his body and provide proper funerary rites essential for afterlife existence. Cutting off a lock of her hair, donning mourning garments, and shape-shifting into a bird of prey, Isis began a relentless search that would take her throughout Egypt and beyond. Her lamentations were so powerful that they moved even the sun god Ra to send divine assistance in the form of Anubis, who helped guide her quest. Isis eventually traced the chest to Byblos, a Phoenician coastal city where the waters had carried it. There, the chest had lodged in a tamarisk tree, which grew around it so rapidly that the king of Byblos had the tree cut down and fashioned into a pillar for his palace, unwittingly enshrining Osiris within his royal residence. Through her divine intuition and diplomatic skill, Isis secured permission to remove the chest and return it to Egypt. But the story was far from over. When Set discovered that Isis had recovered Osiris's body, he was infuriated. Seizing the corpse, he tore it into 14 pieces, which he scattered throughout Egypt, believing this dismemberment would prevent any resurrection. This act symbolically mirrored the 14 days during which the moon wanes from full to new, one of many astronomical dimensions to the myth. Undeterred, Isis once again set forth, this time joined by her sister Nephthys, to recover the scattered parts of her husband. The two goddesses travelled in a papyrus boat, searching the marshlands and riverbanks of Egypt. At each location where they found a piece of Osiris, they built a shrine, explaining the origin of many sacred sites throughout Egypt. In some versions, they recovered 13 pieces, with only the phallus remaining lost, consumed by Nile fish, which thereafter became taboo for priests to eat. Isis crafted a replacement phallus from gold, symbolizing Osiris's continued creative power even in death. With her unparalleled magical knowledge, Isis reassembled Osiris's body, wrapped him in linen bandages, creating the first mummy, and performed funerary rites with the assistance of Anubis. Through elaborate rituals and powerful incantations, Isis temporarily restored Osiris to life, just long enough to conceive a son who would avenge his father and reclaim the throne. This miraculous posthumous conception produced Horus, whose very name means the distant one, referring either to his falcon aspect soaring in the sky or to his conception after his father had become distant in death. Knowing that Set would attempt to kill this legitimate heir, Isis fled to the marshes of the Nile Delta, where she hid in the dense papyrus thickets of Chemis. There, amid crocodile-infested waters and malarial swamps, she raised her son in secret, protecting him from Set's constant searches. The perils of his childhood were many. Scorpion stings, serpent bites, and diseases all threatened the divine child, giving rise to a rich collection of magical texts aimed at healing children by identifying them with the young Horus. In each instance of danger, Isis used her magical prowess to save her son, sometimes with the assistance of other deities like Thoth, who provided healing wisdom. As Horus grew to manhood, he prepared himself for the inevitable confrontation with Set, training in combat and divine magic. When he reached maturity, Horus emerged from hiding to claim his hereditary throne. What followed was not a simple battle, but a prolonged legal and physical struggle that the Egyptians called the contentions of Horus and Set, documented in texts like the Chester Beatty Papyrus the Pharaon and depicted on temple walls throughout Egypt. This epic conflict, lasting 80 years in some accounts, encompassed both physical combat and legal proceedings before the divine tribunal. The gods themselves became divided, with some supporting Horus's legitimate claim and others favoring Set's argument that he deserved the throne by right of strength and experience. Ra often wavered, sometimes favoring his elder descendant Set, while deities like Thoth and Isis advocated persistently for Horus. The struggle featured multiple episodes of deception, violence, and even sexual conflict. In one particularly shocking incident, Set attempted to dominate Horus sexually, but Horus managed to catch Set's semen in his hand, which Isis then cast into the marshes. In retaliation, Isis helped Horus collect his own semen and placed it on lettuce leaves that Set unknowingly consumed. A humiliation when discovered that severely weakened Set's claim to dominance. Another famous episode involved literal combat, during which Set tore out Horus's left eye, while Horus removed Set's testicles. Thoth magically restored Horus's eye, which became the famous Wedjat eye, a powerful symbol of healing and protection in Egyptian culture. Horus then offered this restored eye to his deceased father, Osiris, an act of filial piety that temporarily reinvigorated Osiris in the underworld and became the mythological precedent for offering rituals. Eventually, the divine tribunal, persuaded partly by an eloquent letter from the deceased Osiris, ruled in favor of Horus. In the definitive judgment, Horus received the throne of Egypt, while Set was either banished to the desert or, in some versions, reconciled and given dominion over foreign lands in the desert regions. This resolution established the fundamental pattern for Egyptian kingship. Each living pharaoh was considered the incarnation of Horus, while each deceased king became identified with Osiris. Meanwhile, Osiris assumed his eternal role as ruler of the Duat, underworld, and judge of the dead. Having experienced death himself, he became the perfect arbiter for departed souls. His own resurrection, though different from living restoration, he remained in the underworld rather than returning to earthly life, provided the model for all Egyptians who hoped for eternal existence. Through proper mummification, funerary rituals that paralleled those performed for Osiris, and moral living according to Mayat, Egyptians could become an Osiris after death. The Osiris myth's influence extended far beyond theological spheres into Egyptian daily life. Annual festivals reenacted elements of the story, particularly at Abydos, where Osiris's head was said to be buried. Agricultural cycles were interpreted through the myth's lens, the growing grain representing Osiris's resurrection, the life-giving Nile flood identified with the tears of Isis. Funerary practices for everyone from pharaohs to commoners followed patterns established in the myth, while amulets shaped like the Djed pillar, Osiris's backbone, provided magical protection based on the god's resurrective power. What makes the Osiris myth particularly significant is its comprehensive address of universal human concerns. It explains natural phenomena, the Nile flood, agricultural cycles, celestial movements, establishes social institutions, kingship, succession, justice, confronts existential fears, death, dismemberment, oblivion, and offers hope, resurrection, eternal life, divine justice. Through this single narrative cycle, Egyptians found a framework for understanding both cosmic patterns and personal destiny, bridging the gap between nature's impersonal forces and humanity's quest for meaning. The story's emotional resonance remains powerful even today. The murdered innocent, the grieving widow, the orphaned son seeking justice, the triumph of legitimacy over brute force, and above all, the promise that death itself can be overcome through proper action and divine assistance. While ancient Egyptian civilization has passed into history, the Osiris myth continues to echo through world culture, a testament to its profound engagement with the deepest human hopes and fears. While the Osiris myth addressed the mysteries of death and renewal, equally central to Egyptian cosmology was the daily journey of Ra, a cosmic drama played out in the sky that served as the most visible manifestation of divine order. For the ancient Egyptians, the sun wasn't merely an astronomical object, but a living god whose movements structured time, sustained life, and demonstrated the eternal cycle of existence. This solar theology developed into one of the most elaborate mythological systems in the ancient world, spawning rich iconography and ritual practices that dominated Egyptian religious life. Each dawn, as the eastern horizon brightened, the Egyptians witnessed the birth of Khepri, the scarab-headed manifestation of the morning sun. Like the sacred dung beetle that rolls balls of manure containing its eggs, Khepri was seen to roll the solar disk across the sky, embodying the principle of spontaneous creation and emergence. His name derived from the Egyptian verb khipa, meaning to come into being, a perfect description of the sun's daily rebirth. For the Egyptians, each sunrise represented a microcosm of the original creation, a triumph of order over darkness and chaos. As the sun climbed higher, Khepri transformed into Ra at his full strength, sovereign of the daytime sky. From his solar bark, called the Manjet, boat of millions of years, Ra surveyed his creation, providing warmth, light, and the conditions necessary for all life. This celestial journey wasn't made alone. Ra was accompanied by a divine entourage, including Sia, divine perception, Hu, divine utterance, Heka, magical power, and sometimes Thoth as navigator. Together, they represented the qualities through which divine will manifested in the cosmos. The sun's journey across the sky paralleled the life cycle, powerful ascent in youth, majestic zenith in maturity, and gradual descent in old age. By afternoon, Ra began aging, eventually becoming Atum, the setting sun, who descended toward the western horizon. As Ra-Atum, he appeared as an elderly man, still regal but diminished in strength, representing the natural progression toward death that even the greatest beings must face. This daily visual reminder of mortality reinforced the Egyptians' preoccupation with life cycles and regeneration. But for the Egyptians, sunset did not mean the sun god's death. Rather, it marked the beginning of his most perilous and significant journey. As darkness fell, Ra boarded a second boat, the Mesektet, evening bark, to navigate the dangerous underworld known as the Duat. This nighttime voyage, elaborately detailed in funerary texts like the Amduat, that which is in the underworld, and the Book of Gates, represented both the sun's invisible path beneath the earth and the human soul's journey after death. The Duat was divided into 12 regions, corresponding to the 12 hours of the night, each containing unique challenges, inhabitants, and topography. As Ra progressed through these hours, he encountered both allies and enemies. Friendly deities pulled his boat with ropes. Deceased souls who had achieved vindication basked in his rejuvenating light, and protective spirits stood guard against chaotic forces. The fortunate dead could join Ra's entourage, literally boarding the solar bark, to share in his eternal cycle of renewal, the ultimate afterlife aspiration for many Egyptians. The most dramatic moment in this nocturnal journey occurred in the deepest hour of night, when Ra confronted Apophis, also called Apep, an enormous serpent embodying chaos and non-existence. Unlike the gods, who represented aspects of creation, Apophis was anti-creation itself, the force that threatened to dissolve all existence back into primordial chaos. Each night, Apophis attempted to halt Ra's journey by drinking the waters in which the solar bark sailed, or by coiling around Ra to suffocate his divine light. This cosmic battle represented existence's fundamental struggle against entropy and dissolution. To overcome Apophis, Ra relied on his divine companions, particularly Set, whose chaotic but powerful nature made him the perfect adversary for the Chaos Serpent. With spears and knives, the gods in Ra's entourage would battle Apophis, cutting him into pieces. Yet like chaos itself, Apophis could never be permanently destroyed. He regenerated each night for the battle to begin anew, emphasizing the eternal vigilance required to maintain cosmic order. After this climactic confrontation, Ra began his revitalization. In the later hours of night, he merged with Osiris, temporarily uniting solar and chthonic regenerative powers. This mystical union allowed Ra to absorb the rejuvenating energies of the underworld, while simultaneously bringing vital light to the deceased who dwelled there. The meeting of these two great gods, one representing celestial cycles, the other terrestrial renewal, created a perfect symbol of Egyptian religious syncretism and the interconnectedness of all regenerative processes. By the 12th hour, Ra completed his transformation back into Khepri, ready to be reborn. Depicted as an elderly man in the evening, a ram-headed god at midnight, and a scarab beetle toward dawn, Ra's changing forms throughout the night visually emphasized the transformative nature of his journey. As he approached the eastern horizon, the sun god was typically shown as an infant within a solar disk, ready to be reborn into the day sky. This rebirth was sometimes depicted as emerging from the body of Nut, the sky goddess, who had swallowed the sun at dusk and given birth to it again at dawn. The solar cycle fundamentally shaped Egyptian concepts of time. Unlike linear time with its unrepeatable moments, the sun's daily journey demonstrated cyclical time, eternal repetition with the possibility of renewal. This cosmic pattern provided comfort in a world where human life was often short and precarious. If even the great sun god had to descend into darkness, yet always return, perhaps human souls too could navigate the perils of death and achieve rebirth. Egyptian temples incorporated this solar symbolism into their very architecture. Many temples were aligned on an east-west axis, allowing the rising sun to illuminate their innermost sanctuaries on significant dates. The daily temple rituals mirrored the sun's journey. Doors opened at dawn, offerings reached their peak at midday, and evening ceremonies prepared for the sun's nighttime voyage. Priests performed elaborate rituals to assist Ra in his battles against chaos, demonstrating how religious practice was understood as actual participation in cosmic maintenance. Over the centuries, Ra's theological importance led to numerous syncretistic combinations with other deities. As Amun-Ra, he united with the hidden creator god of Thebes to become a transcendent solar deity who combined the invisibility of air with the visibility of sunlight. As Ra-Horakti, Ra, Horus of the horizons, he merged with aspects of Horus to emphasize his dominion over the horizons where day meets night. As Atum-Ra, he united the setting sun with the primeval creator. These theological developments allowed Ra's solar symbolism to incorporate additional divine aspects while maintaining his essential nature. Perhaps most significant for ordinary Egyptians was how the solar cycle provided a visible daily reminder of divine presence and the reliability of cosmic order. In a world filled with uncertainties, illness, crop failure, political instability, the sun's unfailing return each morning offered tangible evidence that the universe remained fundamentally ordered despite apparent chaos. If the sun god could overcome the serpent of chaos each night, humans too might triumph over their challenges through proper action and divine assistance. For the deceased, Ra's journey offered both model and means for navigating the afterlife. Numerous spells in the Book of the Dead aim to help the deceased join Ra's entourage, transform along with him, or navigate the underworld using knowledge of its geography gleaned from solar mythology. The goal wasn't merely to observe Ra's eternal cycle, but to participate in it, becoming one with the perpetual renewal that defined Egyptian concepts of blessed afterlife. The sun's daily victory over darkness provided Egyptians with their most powerful symbol of the triumph of order over chaos, life over death, and existence over nothingness. In a world where pharaohs died, civilizations rose and fell, and individual lives passed like shadows, the sun's unfailing return offered a cosmic constant, a divine promise that though all things must descend into darkness, rebirth remains eternally possible for those who properly prepare and align themselves with the perpetual rhythms of creation. Underlying all Egyptian mythology and religious practice was a concept so fundamental that without it, the Egyptians believed the universe itself would cease to function. This was the principle of cosmic order, a term that simultaneously denoted truth, justice, harmony, balance, order, and righteousness. More than just an abstract philosophical principle, this concept represented the essential cosmic order established at creation, the moral foundation of Egyptian society, and was personified as a goddess who embodied these qualities. No element of Egyptian thought can be fully understood without grasping this central concept that united their cosmology, ethics, politics, and afterlife beliefs into a coherent worldview. When the creator God first established the universe from primordial chaos, his primary achievement was the establishment of proper order, the way the cosmos was meant to function. The separation of earth from sky, the predictable movement of celestial bodies, the annual flooding of the Nile, the succession of seasons, all these ordered patterns represented this cosmic principle in action. The universe functioned through balanced opposites, day and night, life and death, growth and decay. Rather than seeing these as conflicting forces, Egyptians recognized them as complementary aspects of a harmonious whole. This fundamental truth governed these relationships, maintaining the delicate balance that sustained creation. As a goddess, this concept appeared as a woman wearing an ostrich feather on her head, often depicted with wings representing her all-encompassing nature. Unlike deities who featured prominently in dramatic myths, she rarely appeared as an active character in Egyptian stories. Her power lay not in specific, miraculous acts, but in her omnipresent influence as the foundation of existence itself. In some creation accounts, she stood beside the Creator from the beginning, not so much a created being as the principle through which creation itself became possible. On a cosmic level, this divine order stood in eternal opposition to Isfet, chaos, falsehood, and disorder. The Egyptians viewed creation not as a completed event, but as an ongoing process requiring constant maintenance against the forces of chaos that perpetually threatened to dissolve the ordered universe back into primordial formlessness. Every sunrise represented a victory for order. Every proper offering and ritual helped sustain cosmic balance. Every just action by humans reinforced the structured universe. Conversely, every lie, every selfish deed, every disruption of harmony strengthened the forces of Isfet and jeopardized creation itself. This cosmic struggle took tangible form in Egyptian royal ideology. The pharaoh served as the primary agent of cosmic truth on earth, responsible for maintaining divine order in the human realm. Upon coronation, the king was presented with a small figure of the goddess, symbolizing his responsibility to uphold her principles. Royal titles frequently included phrases like "beloved of truth" or "who lives by justice." In temple scenes, pharaohs were often depicted offering a small figure of the cosmic order, deity, to the gods, a profound symbolic act representing the king's fulfillment of his cosmic role by maintaining order, justice, and truth in Egypt. The concept directly shaped Egyptian governance and legal systems. Viziers, who served as chief justices, wore small images of the truth goddess to signify their commitment to just rulings. Court officials were referred to as priests of truth, while judges wore emblems of the goddess during legal proceedings. The ideal of impartial justice was directly connected to maintaining cosmic harmony. An unjust verdict wasn't merely unfair to an individual, but constituted a tear in the fabric of proper order that could have cosmic consequences. For ordinary Egyptians, living in accordance with divine order meant maintaining harmonious relationships, speaking truthfully, showing proper respect to gods and ancestors, fulfilling family obligations, and performing one's societal role with integrity. The instructions genre of Egyptian wisdom literature frequently emphasized these values, presenting this cosmic principle not as an unattainable ideal, but as a practical guide for daily living. The instructions of Ptah-hotep, for instance, counseled, "Great is truth, lasting in effect, undisturbed since the time of Osiris." This suggested that living according to cosmic order connected contemporary Egyptians with an unbroken tradition stretching back to mythological times. While this universal law established ethical standards, it differed from later moral systems by emphasizing harmony and balance rather than absolute prohibitions. The goal was to maintain proper relationships and proportions in all things. Even attributes modern people might consider entirely positive, like generosity, required balance. Excessive generosity that impoverished one's family would disrupt social harmony just as surely as selfishness would. This nuanced view extended to emotions, bodily needs, social interactions, and religious observances, all of which required proper measure and context. Perhaps nowhere was this concept more vividly expressed than in Egyptian afterlife beliefs, particularly the pivotal scene of the weighing of the heart ceremony. In the Hall of Two Truths, the deceased's heart, seat of intellect, emotion, and moral character in Egyptian thought, was placed on one side of a scale, with the feather of truth on the opposite pan. If the heart balanced perfectly against the feather, the deceased was declared true of voice and admitted to the eternal paradise of the field of reeds. If the heart proved heavier than the feather, weighed down by sins against cosmic order, it would be devoured by the fearsome Amit, the devourer of hearts, resulting in a second permanent death. This judgment scene, depicted in countless copies of the Book of the Dead, powerfully illustrated how the principle of universal balance connected cosmic order with individual moral responsibility. Before the weighing, the deceased recited the famous negative confession, more accurately translated as Declaration of Innocence, listing dozens of transgressions against divine harmony they had not committed. I have not stolen. I have not killed. I have not lied. I have not caused pain. I have not disturbed the offerings to the gods, and so forth. This comprehensive list demonstrated how righteous living governed every aspect of behavior, from religious observance to social interactions to personal integrity. The Egyptians understood that no human could perfectly embody divine truth in every moment. They weren't seeking moral perfection so much as a life generally aligned with cosmic order. In the judgment scene, the god Thoth recorded the scale's verdict, while Osiris made the final judgment, often with 42 divine assessors representing different aspects of righteous existence. Anubis might adjust the scales slightly, suggesting a compassionate element in divine judgment that recognized human limitation. What mattered was the overall weight of one's life, whether one had predominantly supported or undermined the cosmic order. For the Egyptians, this afterlife judgment wasn't a distant theological abstraction, but a practical concern that shaped daily decisions. Autobiographical inscriptions in non-royal tombs frequently emphasized the deceased's adherence to truth. I spoke honestly, I acted justly. I gave bread to the hungry, water to the thirsty, clothes to the naked. I was a husband to the widow, a father to the orphan. These weren't mere boasts, but essential spiritual preparations, establishing the deceased's worthiness for eternal life through demonstration of their alignment with cosmic order. The concept of truth and justice evolved over Egypt's long history while maintaining its essential meaning. During the tumultuous First Intermediate Period, when central authority collapsed and social order disintegrated, literature reflected anxiety about the apparent triumph of Ixfet over righteous harmony. The admonitions of Epua lamented that truth is cast out, Isfet is in the midst of the council chamber, describing a world turned upside down, where the poor became rich, the rich became poor, and traditional values appeared meaningless. This text reveals how closely Egyptians associated proper order with social stability and natural hierarchy. When order was restored in the Middle Kingdom, royal propaganda emphasized the pharaoh's role in re-establishing divine harmony after chaos. Later, during the religious innovations of Akhenaten's reign, even this radical pharaoh claimed to live by truth despite overturning traditional pantheons. In the late period, as Egypt faced foreign domination, the principle of cosmic balance increasingly became connected with nationalist sentiment, maintaining traditional Egyptian values against outside influences. Throughout these changes, the essential concept remained. Cosmic order required constant maintenance through proper action at both royal and individual levels. The power of this unifying principle lay in its multifaceted nature. It simultaneously addressed cosmic concerns, the functioning of the universe, social questions, how people should interact, political matters, the basis of royal authority, ethical issues, personal behavior, and religious beliefs, requirements for the afterlife. By connecting these domains through a single overarching concept, Egyptian civilization achieved a remarkable integration of cosmology and ethics, where personal morality directly participated in maintaining universal order. This holistic worldview helps explain the remarkable stability of Egyptian civilization across 3 millennia. Despite invasions, occasional internal collapses, and gradually evolving theology, the cosmic truth concept provided cultural continuity, an ethical and cosmic foundation that remained recognizable from pre-dynastic times through the Roman period. While specific expressions of religion changed, the fundamental understanding that humans participated in maintaining cosmic order through truthful living remained constant. Perhaps most striking to modern sensibilities is how this Egyptian principle unified domains we typically separate: science and religion, ethics and physics, personal morality and cosmic functionality. For Egyptians, the ordered movements of stars, the predictable flooding of the Nile, the succession of seasons, just governance, truthful speech, and ethical treatment of others all expressed the same fundamental principle. Living by divine truth meant aligning oneself with the essential nature of the cosmos, a profound spiritual concept that anchored individual human lives within the grand cosmic order. The practical expression of this principle extended into legal and administrative systems. Court officials were literally called priests of truth, wearing small amulets of the goddess during proceedings to symbolize their commitment to just outcomes. Legal documents concluded with phrases invoking these principles, while oath-taking invoked the deity as witness. This integration of cosmic principle and practical governance created a system where justice wasn't merely human convention, but participation in divine order. Even tax collection was conceptualized as maintaining proper distribution of resources according to balanced proportion, rather than merely funding state operations. The artistic representation of the goddess conveyed her fundamental nature through elegant symbolism, typically depicted as a woman wearing a single ostrich feather on her head, the same feather used in the weighing of hearts. Her human form, with minimal divine attributes, emphasized her accessibility. Unlike gods depicted with elaborate crowns or animal features, her simple presentation suggested her fundamental nature. The ostrich feather itself symbolized both lightness, contrasting with the heavy heart of the unrighteous, and air breath, the essential element of life given at creation that properly returned to divine source through truthful living. Literary texts expanded the concept beyond ritual contexts into practical wisdom. The instruction genre of literature frequently centered on righteous living as its organizing principle, with texts like The Instruction of Tahotep, advising, "Great is truth, enduring in effect. It has not been disturbed since the time of Osiris." These instructional works provided practical guidance on applying these principles in daily situations, from family relationships to business dealings, court behavior to religious observance. By framing everyday ethics within this cosmic concept, Egyptian wisdom literature created a seamless connection between practical behavior and universal order. The Egyptian concept of cosmic order offers striking contrasts and parallels with ethical systems from other ancient civilizations. Unlike Mesopotamian morality, which emphasized obedience to divine commands that could seem arbitrary, The Egyptian view presented ethical behavior as alignment with the fundamental nature of reality itself. Unlike later Greek philosophical ethics focused on human reasoning, this approach embedded ethical principles in cosmic structure prior to human interpretation. Yet it shared with Confucian Li the concept that proper social relationships reflected cosmic harmony, and with Vedic Dharma, the idea that individual action affected universal balance. What made this Egyptian principle particularly powerful was its resistance to abstract intellectualization, divorced from practice. It wasn't primarily a philosophical concept to be discussed, but a reality to be enacted through proper speech, ritual correctness, ethical behavior, and social harmony. The Egyptians recognized that cosmic order required continuous participation rather than mere acknowledgement. One didn't simply believe in divine truth. One enacted it through proper living, maintained it through ritual action, restored it through just decisions, and ultimately embodied it through truthful character capable of passing the afterlife judgment. This insistence on practical embodiment of cosmic principle helped Egyptian civilization maintain remarkable cultural stability across changing historical circumstances. While political systems rose and fell, foreign powers occasionally dominated, and specific theological expressions evolved. The fundamental conception of a universe governed by truth and balance provided continuity across 3 millennia of Egyptian history, a testament to how effectively this concept integrated cosmic understanding with practical living in ways that remained meaningful across generations of Egyptian experience. No civilization in history devoted more resources, artistic genius, or intellectual energy to preparing for the afterlife than ancient Egypt. From the colossal pyramids that still dominate the Giza Plateau to the humblest painted wooden coffin, Egyptian material culture overwhelmingly focused on ensuring eternal existence beyond death. This preoccupation with afterlife wasn't driven by morbidity, but by an intense affirmation of life so profound that Egyptians refused to accept its termination, developing instead one of history's most elaborate and hopeful visions of existence beyond the grave. Egyptian conceptions of the afterlife evolved significantly over their long history, yet certain fundamental beliefs remained relatively consistent. Central to their understanding was the complex Egyptian view of human composition. Rather than a simple body-soul dualism, Egyptians conceived of the person as a composite of multiple elements: the physical body, the kai, the bai, the shut, the ren, and the akaj. Each component played a vital role in afterlife existence, necessitating the elaborate preparations that characterized Egyptian funerary practices. The kai, often translated inadequately as double or life force, represented the vital essence received at birth that distinguished the living from the dead. It required sustenance even after death, which explains the extensive food offerings in Egyptian tombs and the development of offering formulas intended to magically provide nourishment. Statues placed in tombs served as alternate homes for the kai if the mummified body should perish, providing a physical anchor in the material world. The ba, typically depicted as a human-headed bird, represented the mobile aspect of the personality that could travel between worlds. After death, the ba could leave the tomb during daylight hours to visit familiar places, enjoy the sunshine, or receive offerings before returning to the body at night. This concept allowed Egyptians to reconcile the seemingly contradictory desires for the deceased, to both remain preserved in the tomb and enjoy freedom of movement. When properly unified in the afterlife, these elements formed the ache, the transfigured, effective spirit that could dwell among the gods and stars. Becoming an ark represented the ultimate goal of funerary preparations, not merely continuing existence but achieving a transformed divine state. The word Ark, written with the crested ibis hieroglyph, carried connotations of radiance and effectiveness, suggesting the luminous, powerful condition of those who had successfully navigated the transition to eternal life. The journey to this blessed state was fraught with dangers, necessitating extensive magical and ritual preparations. Immediately after death, the deceased faced a hazardous journey through the underworld, navigating its complex geography populated by fearsome guardians, gates requiring passwords, and supernatural beings who could help or hinder progress. Knowledge was power in this realm. Knowing the names of gatekeepers, possessing the correct spells, and understanding the underworld's topography could mean the difference between achieving eternal life and suffering a second death of permanent extinction. To provide this essential knowledge, Egyptians developed increasingly elaborate funerary texts. The pyramid texts, humanity's oldest known religious writings, covered the interior walls of Old Kingdom royal pyramids with hundreds of spells designed to help the king ascend to the celestial realm. These texts reflected an early conception of royal afterlife primarily associated with the stars, particularly the imperishable circumpolar stars that never set below the horizon, symbolizing eternal, unchanging existence. As afterlife hopes democratized, the coffin texts emerged during the Middle Kingdom, adapting royal funerary magic for non-royal use. Inscribed primarily on coffins, these spells helped ordinary Egyptians navigate the underworld and transform into effective spirits. By the New Kingdom, these evolved into the Book of the Dead, more accurately translated as Book of Coming Forth by Day, typically written on papyrus scrolls placed with the mummy. Its approximately 200 spells, accompanied by vivid illustrations, provided a comprehensive magical toolkit for afterlife success, transforming into animals to overcome obstacles, breathing air in the underworld, preventing the heart from testifying against its owner, and ensuring proper nourishment. Complementing these portable texts, elaborate guidebooks to the underworld adorned New Kingdom royal tombs. Works like the Amduat, the Book of Gates, and the Book of Caverns map the underworld's 12 divisions, corresponding to the 12 hours of night, detailing the sun, God's nocturnal journey, with which the deceased hope to unite. These compositions combined practical navigation information with profound theological reflections on transformation, rebirth, and the cyclical nature of existence. The ultimate challenge in the afterlife journey came in the Hall of Two Truths, where the deceased faced judgment before Osiris and 42 divine assessors. Here occurred the pivotal weighing of the heart ceremony, where the heart, seat of conscience and character, was balanced against the feather of Ma'at. The outcome determined whether one would achieve blessed afterlife or face oblivion. This judgment scene powerfully connected ethical behavior during life with afterlife prospects, creating a practical incentive for moral living that reinforced social harmony. For those who successfully passed judgment, several afterlife destinations awaited, often blended in Egyptian thought rather than seen as mutually exclusive. The Field of Reeds, Aru, offered an idealized version of Egyptian agricultural life, where the deceased could plow, sow, and harvest eternally abundant crops without the hardships of earthly farming. The Field of Offerings provided an eternal banquet where one received divine sustenance. For the most blessed, joining Ra's solar bark allowed participation in the eternal cosmic cycle, while going forth by day permitted return to the earthly realm to enjoy its pleasures during daylight hours. To facilitate this complex afterlife, Egyptians developed the world's most sophisticated preservation techniques for the human body. Mummification evolved from simple desert burials, where hot sand naturally desiccated corpses, to an elaborate 70-day procedure involving evisceration, desiccation with natron salt, resin application, wrapping with hundreds of meters of linen, and protective amulets placed between the layers. The culminating opening of the mouth ceremony ritually reanimated the mummy, restoring its senses and ability to receive offerings. This preserved body provided a permanent anchor for the BA's nightly return, an eventual reunion with other spiritual elements. The substantial investment in tomb preparation, even by non-elite Egyptians, demonstrates how integral afterlife beliefs were to Egyptian culture. Tombs were conceived as houses of eternity, equipped with everything needed for comfortable existence: furniture, clothing, toiletries, food, drink, games, and texts for entertainment and religious practice. Tomb decoration emphasized pleasant earthly scenes, banquets, hunting, fishing, and family gatherings that the deceased wished to magically continue enjoying. Meanwhile, statues provided alternate homes for the Ka, and inscriptions preserved the all-important name, without which one could not be identified for offerings or remembered by the living. Family obligations to the deceased didn't end with burial. The living were expected to maintain tomb offerings, remember the dead through speaking their names, and perform rituals that sustained their afterlife existence. In return, well-provided deceased relatives could intercede with greater gods on behalf of the living, or use their supernatural abilities to protect family members. This reciprocal relationship created a community spanning the boundary between living and dead, with practical obligations flowing in both directions. While Egyptian afterlife concepts evolved substantially over time, becoming increasingly complex and democratized, they maintained remarkable continuity in fundamental optimism. Unlike the shadowy, diminished underworld existence found in Mesopotamian beliefs, or the early Hebrew conception of Sheol, Egyptian afterlife offered the possibility of a fully realized, even enhanced existence. The blessed dead were typically called the living ones, reflecting the Egyptian view that proper preparation allowed genuine life to continue indefinitely beyond the grave. This afterlife vision profoundly shaped Egyptian culture, from architecture and art to ethics and daily practices. The promise of eternal life motivated adherence to Ma'at, as one's heart would literally testify about one's deeds in the divine court. The need to be remembered by the living encouraged contribution to community and family during life. The desire for a furnished tomb stimulated artistic production and craft specialization, while elite competition for impressive monuments drove architectural innovation. Perhaps most significantly, Egyptian afterlife beliefs provided a framework for confronting mortality that emphasized continuity rather than rupture, preparation rather than fear, and the ultimate triumph of life over death. By conceptualizing death as a transformative passage rather than an end, Egyptians created a cultural response to mortality's universal challenge that allowed them to embrace life's pleasures while acknowledging its temporary nature. Their elaborate mortuary culture represents not an obsession with death, but a passionate affirmation that existence, properly prepared for, need not end with the body's failure. Before mortal pharaohs ruled the Nile Valley, the Egyptians believed their land had been governed directly by the gods themselves. This mythical era, called Zep Tepi, or First Time, established the pattern for all subsequent kingship and formed the mythological foundation of Egyptian political theology. According to the Turin King List and other ancient records, divine rule lasted for thousands of years, before gradually transitioning to semi-divine rulers and finally to fully human pharaohs. This mythological prehistory wasn't regarded as mere legend, but as actual history, providing the essential framework that legitimized the institution of kingship throughout Egyptian civilization. The divine reign began with the creator deity himself, whether named Atum, Ra, or Ptah, depending on the theological tradition. Having established the cosmos and its fundamental order, the creator ruled as the first king, establishing the archetypal pattern of divine authority. In many accounts, Ra's reign represented a golden age of perfect harmony, when humans and gods lived in closer communion. No disease, strife, or falsehood existed, and creation perfectly reflected the divine intent. This paradisiacal era established the ideal against which all subsequent periods were measured, explaining why Egyptians looked perpetually backward to a perfect past, rather than forward to future progress. This idyllic state eventually deteriorated when humans began plotting against elderly Ra. In the myth of the heavenly cow, preserved on several New Kingdom royal tombs, Ra learned of humanity's rebellious plans and summoned a divine council to determine their punishment. On his behalf, the goddess Hathor transformed into her fierce aspect Sekhmet and began slaughtering the disloyal humans. When Ra finally took pity on humanity and decided to halt the massacre, he had to trick Sekhmet by dyeing beer red to resemble blood, which she drank until too intoxicated to continue her rampage. Disillusioned with human ingratitude, Ra decided to withdraw from direct earthly rule, ascending to the heavens on the back of the celestial cow goddess Nut. Before departing, he reorganized cosmic governance, appointing Thoth as his vizier and representative on Earth, while entrusting Osiris with kingship over humanity. This mythical transfer of power established the pattern of delegated divine authority that would characterize Egyptian kingship. The pharaoh ruling not independently, but as the designated representative of divine power. The reign of Osiris became another mythological golden age, during which this benevolent deity taught humans agriculture, proper religious observance, and the arts of civilization. His rule exemplified the ideal king governing through wisdom rather than force, promoting abundance and justice rather than exploitation. This harmonious period ended with his murder by Set, initiating the mythic cycle of disruption and restoration that would provide the theological template for understanding political transitions throughout Egyptian history. Following Osiris's death and posthumous conception of his son, Horus grew to maturity and claimed his rightful inheritance. The ensuing struggle between Horus and Set for Egypt's throne provided the mythological precedent for all royal succession and legitimacy claims. When Horus finally prevailed, receiving the crown as his birthright, he established the fundamental pattern that every Egyptian king would follow. The living pharaoh was Horus incarnate, while his deceased predecessor became identified with Osiris. After these fully divine rulers came legendary dynasties of semi-divine beings. The followers of Horus, Shemsu-Hor, were described as partially divine rulers who governed during the transitional period between direct divine rule and human kingship. Archaeological evidence suggests these might represent actual pre-dynastic rulers whose achievements were later mythologized. Each historical dynasty claimed connection to these semi-divine predecessors, creating an unbroken chain of authority stretching back to the gods themselves. This mythological history wasn't merely cultural background, but formed the theological foundation for the institution of pharaonic rule. Unlike neighboring cultures, where kings might be described as favored by the gods or adopted by deities, Egyptian pharaohs were literally divine, the god Horus physically present on earth in human form. This wasn't metaphorical rhetoric, but a central theological claim that the living king embodied divine presence, making the pharaoh not just a political ruler, but a cosmic necessity whose rituals and proper governance maintained universal order. The divine nature of pharaonic kingship manifested in royal titles, iconography, and rituals from the earliest dynasties. The pharaoh's titulary included 5 names, each connecting him to different aspects of divine power. The Horus name, identifying him as the living embodiment of Horus. The Nebti name, associating him with the protective goddesses of Upper and Lower Egypt. The Golden Horus name, emphasizing his divine nature. The Prenomen, throne name prefixed by King of Upper and Lower Egypt. And the Nomen, birth name prefixed by Son of Ra. These weren't merely honorifics, but theological statements positioning the king within the divine hierarchy and cosmic order. Royal regalia, similarly, expressed the pharaoh's divine status. The crook and flail, borrowed from Osiris iconography, identified the king with this resurrected god. The Uraeus serpent on the royal brow represented the fiery eye of Ra that destroyed enemies. The false beard connected the king to Osiris's appearance. Even the characteristic Egyptian stance, seen in royal statuary, left foot forward, arms rigid, gaze fixed on eternity, expressed superhuman qualities transcending mortal limitations. Upon coronation, the new king underwent rituals that transformed him from private individual to divine incarnation. The most important ceremony, poorly understood due to its secret nature, involved what Egyptologists call the Transfiguration ritual, in which the mortal human became fully identified with Horus. Coronation texts describe the king receiving the crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt directly from the hands of the gods, being suckled by divine mothers and receiving the breath of life from deities who make room for him in their midst. Throughout his reign, the pharaoh performed rituals essential for cosmic maintenance. Most crucial was the daily temple ritual, performed personally in the main state temples, or by priests acting explicitly as royal deputies elsewhere. In this ceremony, the king approached the divine image, broke its shrine's seal, performed purifications, presented offerings, and received divine blessing. All actions ensuring continued divine presence in Egypt and proper cosmic function. This wasn't mere ceremony, but vital cosmic work upon which creation's stability depended. By the New Kingdom, the concept of divine kingship developed further complexity through the royal Ka, a divine essence of kingship that transcended individual rulers. Unlike the personal Kai possessed by every human, the royal Kai represented the divine office of kingship itself, passing from one pharaoh to the next while maintaining continuity. Special temples, called mansions of the royal Ka, were built where this divine essence could receive offerings and rituals, emphasizing that pharaonic divinity involved both the individual ruler and the eternal institution he temporarily embodied. The divine nature of kingship created theological challenges when historical realities diverged from the ideal. Female rulers, like Hatshepsut, had to be depicted with masculine attributes in official art despite their biological sex, as the living Horus was conceptualized as male. Foreign conquerors, who became pharaohs, like the Hyksos or later Persians, needed to adopt Egyptian royal iconography and theology to legitimize their rule. Even periods of civil war or divided kingship required complex theological explanations, often presented as recapitulations of the Horus-Set conflict, requiring eventual restoration of proper order. Perhaps the most dramatic theological challenge came during Akhenaten's religious revolution, when traditional conceptions of divine kingship were radically transformed. While traditional pharaohs functioned as intermediaries between humanity and multiple deities, Akhenaten claimed unique access to the Aten, solar disk, positioning himself as the sole interpreter of divine will. His revolutionary theology made the king and his family the only channel through which divine blessing could flow. creating an unprecedented concentration of religious and political power. This theological innovation proved unsustainable, collapsing after his death with a forceful return to traditional concepts of divine kingship. Despite such periods of innovation or disruption, the fundamental concept of pharaonic divinity remained remarkably stable across 3 millennia. Even during the late period, when Egypt faced repeated foreign domination, the theological framework persisted. Greek Ptolemaic rulers adopted Egyptian royal regalia and religious duties, while even Roman emperors were depicted on temple walls in traditional pharaonic garb performing essential rituals. The theological necessity of divine kingship for cosmic maintenance made abandoning the concept unthinkable, regardless of political realities. For ordinary Egyptians, the pharaoh's divine nature didn't translate into freedom from criticism or absolute power. The concept of Ma'at constrained legitimate royal authority within ethical boundaries. Wisdom texts advised kings on proper governance, while pessimistic literature from periods of instability openly criticized rulers who failed their divine responsibilities. The ideal divine king governed justly, maintained Ma'at, defended Egypt from chaos, and ensured divine favor manifested as abundance and security. A pharaoh who failed these expectations might still claim divine status, but was understood to be failing his cosmic function. The pharaoh's divinity made him not just Egypt's ruler, but its chief priest, cosmic maintainer, and living embodiment of proper order. Through the king, the realm of the gods and the human world remained connected, with divine blessing flowing through the pharaoh to sustain creation. This theological framework provided remarkable stability for one of history's longest-lasting political institutions, allowing Egyptian kingship to absorb tremendous historical changes while maintaining its essential character and legitimizing function across the millennia. Beyond the majestic gods and goddesses who dominated Egyptian religious life, existed a shadow realm populated by extraordinary beings, formidable monsters, and supernatural entities that embodied the more dangerous and chaotic aspects of the cosmos. These creatures, some terrifying, others protective, many ambivalent, played crucial roles in Egyptian mythology, representing forces that threatened cosmic order or paradoxically helped maintain it. Unlike the major deities who received temple worship and regular offerings, these supernatural beings operated at the margins of ordered existence, in the liminal spaces between categories, embodying the uncanny forces that both frightened and fascinated the ancient Egyptians. Most fearsome among these entities was Apophis, also called Apep, the gigantic serpent who represented absolute chaos and non-existence. Unlike Set, who embodied necessary but dangerous natural forces like storms and desert heat, Apophis represented ante-creation itself, the primordial nothingness that threatened to dissolve all existence back into undifferentiated chaos. Described as a serpent of many coils, measuring as long as the underworld itself, Apophis attacked Ra's solar boat each night, attempting to swallow the sun and extinguish its life-giving light forever. What made Apophis particularly terrifying was his immortality. Unlike the gods, who could be killed or dismembered in Egyptian mythology before being restored, Apophis could never be permanently destroyed. Each night, the serpent was speared, cut into pieces, burnt, or bound, only to regenerate for the next night's confrontation. This eternal antagonist represented entropy itself, the tendency of ordered systems to break down that required constant vigilance and effort to combat. The Egyptians performed ritual execrations against Apophis, symbolically destroying his image by stabbing wax effigies, trampling drawings of the serpent, or burning papyri bearing his name. Magical practices designed to assist Ra in his nightly battle against chaos. While Apophis threatened cosmic existence, Amit, the devourer of hearts, menaced individual immortality. This composite monster, depicted with the head of a crocodile, the front body of a lion, and the back body of a hippopotamus, combined Egypt's most dangerous animals into a single horrifying entity. Amit crouched beside the scales of judgment in the Hall of Two Truths, eagerly awaiting hearts that failed the weighing against Ma'at's feather. Consuming these hearts resulted in the second death, not mere physical demise, but complete spiritual annihilation, the most terrifying fate imaginable to Egyptians who had devoted enormous resources to ensuring eternal existence. Interestingly, despite her terrifying function, Amit was not considered evil or demonic in Egyptian theology. Rather, she performed a necessary cosmic function by eliminating those elements that threatened Ma'at through their ethical misconduct. She never received worship or offerings, yet temple and tomb images depicted her with remarkable consistency across centuries, demonstrating her essential place in Egyptian afterlife beliefs. The threat Amit posed created powerful motivation for ethical living, translating abstract concerns about cosmic order into visceral fear of personal extinction. Among the more ambivalent supernatural beings were the 7 scorpions who accompanied Isis during her flight with the infant Horus. These magical arachnids served as the goddess's protectors and agents, yet their poisonous nature made them dangerous to innocent bystanders. In one famous episode, the scorpions stung a woman who had refused Isis hospitality, forcing the compassionate goddess to heal the victim with her magical powers. This story illustrated how even protective supernatural entities could cause collateral damage through their dangerous natures, a reflection of how Egyptians understood natural dangers as sometimes necessary but requiring careful management. The fearsome demon Amut, the Bone Eater, haunted cemeteries and threatened to consume the deceased before they could complete their transformation into blessed spirits. Unlike Amit, who served cosmic justice, Amut represented the indiscriminate threat of decay and desecration that even the properly prepared dead needed magical protection against. Funerary texts included spells specifically designed to repel this entity, demonstrating how Egyptian afterlife preparations addressed not just the initial judgment, but ongoing spiritual hazards in the afterlife realms. Not all supernatural entities were threatening. The Bennu bird, a self-created being associated with the rising sun and periodic renewal, represented benevolent transformation. Described as a large heron or similar long-legged waterbird with magnificent plumage, the Bennu was said to have flown over the primordial waters at creation, its cry breaking the primeval silence. Every 500 years, according to later Greek interpretations as the phoenix, the Bennu would build a nest that became its funeral pyre, from which it emerged renewed, providing a powerful symbol of cyclical regeneration that aligned perfectly with Egyptian concepts of eternal return. Equally benevolent were the 4 sons of Horus, Imseti, Hapi, Duamutef, and Kebezenuef, who protected the mummified organs of the deceased stored in canopic jars. Depicted with human, baboon, jackal, and falcon heads respectively, these entities preserved the vital organs needed for afterlife existence, while simultaneously serving as cosmic pillars supporting the 4 corners of the sky. Their dual function demonstrated the Egyptian tendency to see connections between microcosm and macrocosm, where protectors of individual bodies simultaneously maintained larger cosmic structures. Some supernatural beings occupied ambiguous territory between major deities and lesser spirits. The Ogdoad of Hermopolis, 8 primordial entities representing aspects of pre-creation chaos, were depicted with frog and serpent heads, emphasizing their primitive, preordered nature. These beings predated creation itself, yet participated in generating the ordered universe, demonstrating how even chaotic primeval forces could contribute to cosmic order when properly channeled and contained. Egyptian households contended with numerous invisible entities that required magical management. Protective figures, like the grotesque dwarf god Bez, frightened away malevolent spirits that targeted sleeping people, particularly pregnant women and infants. With his lion's mane, protruding tongue, and bandy legs, Bess's frightening appearance served apotropaic functions. His ugliness scared away even uglier forces. Ordinary homes contained his image on furniture, cosmetic items, and amulets, making him one of the most frequently encountered supernatural beings in daily Egyptian life. More threatening were the wandering dead called Mut, who had failed to achieve proper afterlife status. Unlike the properly prepared blessed dead, these entities could cause illness, nightmares, and misfortune, if not appeased or repelled through proper magical means. Letters to the dead, found by archaeologists, reveal how Egyptians negotiated with potentially troublesome deceased relatives, offering sustenance and remembrance in exchange for protection rather than haunting, demonstrating sophisticated psychological approaches to managing supernatural threats. The Egyptian awareness of supernatural danger extended to specific dangerous times when hostile forces gained temporary advantage. Particular calendar days marked as inauspicious required special precautions and limited activities. The transitional period between years, the 5 epagomenal days added to complete the 365-day calendar, represented an especially dangerous time when the normal cosmic order was weakened, allowing chaotic forces greater influence. Special protective rituals and amulets helped ordinary Egyptians navigate these heightened danger periods. While contemporary popular culture often mischaracterizes ancient Egyptian religion as dominated by animal worship or simplistic deities, careful examination reveals a sophisticated cosmology that recognized both ordered divine powers and more ambiguous, dangerous supernatural forces. The Egyptians developed nuanced approaches to managing these entities, not merely fearing monsters, but integrating them into a comprehensive worldview where even threatening beings served necessary cosmic functions. Through ritual, magic, and ethical living, Egyptians navigated a world populated by forces beyond human control, creating a spiritual technology for maintaining order amid the ever-present threat of chaos. This complex supernatural ecology reflected the actual ecological conditions of ancient Egypt, where the narrow band of fertile land along the Nile existed in constant tension with the surrounding desert. Just as Egyptians maintained agricultural order through ceaseless irrigation and careful management of natural forces, they maintained cosmic order through proper ritual engagement with supernatural powers, both benevolent and dangerous. The monsters and extraordinary beings of Egyptian mythology weren't primitive imaginings, but sophisticated symbolic expressions of the precarious balance between order and chaos that defined Egyptian existence. In the fluid cosmology of ancient Egypt, boundaries between categories were permeable, identities were mutable, and reality itself could be manipulated through proper knowledge and ritual action. Transformation, called keeper in Egyptian, the same word that formed the name of the scarab-headed creator deity Khepri, stood as a fundamental principle of existence, observable in natural cycles like the sun's daily rebirth, the Nile's annual flood, and the transformation of tadpoles into frogs. This capacity for radical change in form or state extended from the gods themselves to humans who possess sufficient magical knowledge, creating a mythological framework in which metamorphosis represented not fantasy, but an essential cosmic principle. The gods themselves provided the primary models of transformation. Ra changed form throughout his daily journey, appearing as Khepri in the morning, Ra at midday, and Etum in the evening, before transforming through various regenerative forms during his nocturnal underworld passage. The goddess Hathor could manifest as the nurturing celestial cow, or transform into the bloodthirsty lioness Sekhmet when circumstances required ferocity. Nut, the sky goddess, appeared variously as a woman arched over the earth, a celestial cow carrying the sun between her horns, or a sow devouring her piglets, the stars, each morning, only to rebirth them each evening. These divine transformations weren't understood as mere symbolic representations, but as actual metamorphoses that the gods underwent. In the contendings of Horus and Set, these deities engaged in a shape-shifting duel, with Horus becoming a hippopotamus and Set responding with appropriate counter-transformations. When Isis sought to learn Ra's secret name, she transformed a drop of the aging sun, God's drool, into a venomous serpent that bit him, forcing him to reveal his true name to receive healing. In countless other myths, deities transformed themselves or others as essential plot elements, demonstrating the fundamental Egyptian belief that form was mutable rather than fixed, even for the most powerful cosmic beings. The mythic principle of transformation extended to deceased humans seeking afterlife existence. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, more accurately called the Book of Coming Forth by Day, contained numerous spells enabling the deceased to transform into various creatures or entities. Spell 76 allowed transformation into a falcon, Spell 77 into a hawk, Spell 83 into a phoenix, Spell 84 into a heron, and others facilitated becoming a lotus, divine light, a god, or various other beneficial forms. These transformations weren't understood as symbolic, but as actual metamorphoses that the properly prepared deceased could undergo, allowing navigation of afterlife challenges through the adoption of appropriate forms. The magical concept of becoming extended beyond physical transformation to identity assimilation. Through proper ritual and recitation, a person could declare, "I am Osiris," or "I am Ra," and temporarily access the powers and protection of that deity. This principle, called Henmamet in Egyptian, sometimes translated as identification or unification, allowed ritual practitioners to participate in divine power by temporarily merging their identity with a higher cosmic entity. During funerary rituals, for instance, the embalmer would declare, "I am Anubis," to access the divine knowledge necessary for proper mummification. This concept appears strikingly in the Egyptian understanding of images and statues. When properly activated through the opening of the mouth ceremony, a statue wasn't merely a representation of a person or deity, but became a valid receptacle for their kai, life force, capable of receiving offerings and providing blessings. The ritual transformed inert material into a living vessel, demonstrating the Egyptian belief that proper knowledge and ritual could fundamentally alter an object's metaphysical nature. Central to Egyptian concepts of transformation was the power of words and names. Unlike modern cultures that often treat names as arbitrary labels, Egyptians considered a name, Ren, to be an essential component of personal existence. To know something's true name was to have power over it, a principle dramatically illustrated in the myth where Isis poisoned Ra and forced him to reveal his secret name in exchange for healing. By learning this name, Isis gained a portion of Ra's power, demonstrating why many deities kept their true names hidden. This concept extended to humans, explaining the Egyptian practice of having multiple names, including a good name for public use and a true name known only to close family members. The creative power of speech reached its fullest expression in the Memphite theology, where the creator god Ptah brought the universe into existence through the combined power of his heart, mind, and tongue, speech. This concept of creative utterance, Heka, often translated as magic, wasn't peripheral to Egyptian religion, but central to their understanding of how reality operated. Words properly spoken with correct knowledge and ritual purity could affect physical reality, heal illnesses, repel dangers, transform substances, or communicate with supernatural realms. This wasn't supernatural in the modern sense, but represented the proper application of natural cosmic laws as Egyptians understood them. Heka permeated every aspect of Egyptian civilization. Medical practices combined physical remedies with spoken incantations that identified the patient with a god, typically Horus, who had suffered similar afflictions and been healed. Agricultural activities incorporated verbal formulas, ensuring fertility and protection from pests. Even major state projects like temple construction began with verbal rituals that transformed the building site from ordinary space to sacred ground. Rather than seeing these practices as separate from practical activities, Egyptians understood verbal and material components as equally necessary aspects of effective action in a cosmos responsive to properly formulated speech. Egyptian magic operated through several key principles that revealed their sophisticated understanding of symbolic action. One fundamental concept was that of the pars pro toto. The part represents the whole. A lock of hair, nail clipping, or written name could stand in magically for the entire person, allowing either protective or harmful magic to affect someone through these connected parts. This principle explains why royal names were carefully guarded, why tomb images of dangerous creatures sometimes had their heads or legs removed to neutralize their power, and why substitution magic using wax figures could transfer illness from a patient to the destroyed surrogate. Another operational principle was sympathetic correspondence, the idea that things sharing qualities could affect each other across distances. Red substances like carnelian or jasper corresponded to blood and life force, making them effective in healing blood disorders. Images of the young sun god rising could facilitate the rejuvenation of the deceased. Words written in specific colored inks activated corresponding cosmic forces. These weren't arbitrary associations, but reflected the Egyptian understanding of a universe bound together by networks of sympathetic connection that ritual specialists could activate. The ultimate embodiment of magical transformation came in the person of Isis, goddess of magic par excellence. While numerous deities employed magical powers, Isis represented Heka in its purest form, creative transformation that could overcome even death itself. Her magical reassembly and temporary reanimation of Osiris demonstrated magic's most profound potential, the reversal of the ultimate cosmic boundary between life and death. Countless myths depicted Isis using her magical knowledge to transform situations, protect her son Horus, or outsmart more physically powerful deities, establishing her as Egyptian mythology's paramount magical practitioner. Yet Egyptian magic was neither unconstrained nor individualistic. Proper magical practice required knowledge, ritual purity, and appropriate timing, according to auspicious days and astronomical conditions. The most powerful magical texts were closely guarded in temple houses of life, where priest scribes studied and copied sacred writings. Magic that violated Ma'at or threatened cosmic order was condemned as dangerous Isfet, chaos, rather than legitimate Heka. Personal magical practice was expected to align with, not contravene, the fundamental cosmic order established by the gods. Perhaps most revealing of Egyptian perspectives on transformation was the linguistic connection between magic, Heka, creative speech, and effective governance. The same conceptual complex that described magical effectiveness also applied to successful royal decrees and divine creative acts. A pharaoh whose commands manifested effectively in reality demonstrated the same principle of transformative speech that powered magical incantations. Divine creative utterances, royal decrees, and magical spells all exemplified the same fundamental process. Properly formulated speech transforming potential into actuality. The ubiquity of transformative concepts in Egyptian thought reveals a culture that viewed reality as dynamic rather than static, process-oriented rather than fixed, and fundamentally responsive to proper knowledge and ritual action. Their mythology wasn't merely a collection of stories, but a complex symbolic system expressing this fluid cosmology, where identities could merge, boundaries could be crossed, and even death itself could be overcome through proper application of the cosmic principles governing transformation. For 3 millennia, this transformative worldview provided Egyptians with a framework for understanding and interacting with a universe they experienced as both orderly and mutable, governed by knowable principles yet responsive to human ritual engagement. The mythology of ancient Egypt was neither monolithic nor static. Across its vast territory, stretching from Mediterranean shores to Nubian borders, and throughout its 3,000-year history, Egyptian religious concepts developed remarkable diversity while maintaining essential continuity. Regional theological traditions flourished alongside national cults. Foreign deities were adopted and transformed, and gods merged or differentiated according to evolving cultural needs. This complex religious landscape reflected Egypt's unique political structure, a unified state that nevertheless preserved strong regional identities, and an isolated civilization that still engaged in cultural exchange with neighboring powers. Long before Egypt's political unification, around 3100 BCE, distinct regional religious traditions had developed in the various population centers along the Nile. Each nome, administrative district, maintained its own local deities, creation accounts, and religious practices that continued even after political centralization. Rather than suppressing these local traditions, the unified Egyptian state incorporated them into a comprehensive theological system that acknowledged these variations while establishing overarching religious frameworks that supported national unity. The contrast between Upper and Lower Egyptian religious traditions represented the most fundamental regional division. In the Nile Delta of Lower Egypt, where fertile marshlands and multiple river branches created a landscape of abundance, deities associated with moisture, fertility, and aquatic environments predominated. Goddesses played particularly prominent roles in Delta religion, with deities like Neith of Sais, Bastet of Bubastis, and Wadjet of Buto commanding significant cult centers. Lower Egyptian creation accounts often emphasized watery beginnings, and many Delta deities took symbolic forms as aquatic creatures or marsh-dwelling animals. In Upper Egypt, where the narrow Nile Valley was sharply delineated from surrounding deserts, different theological emphases emerged. Solar cults gained particular prominence, with Ra of Heliopolis and later Amun of Thebes becoming dominant male deities. Creation accounts from Upper Egypt more frequently emphasized the primeval mound emerging from chaos, reflecting the annual experience of land appearing from the receding flood. Desert edges and mountain ranges influenced Upper Egyptian religious iconography, with falcon gods associated with high places and deities related to mineral wealth achieving prominence. Even within these broader regions, individual cities developed distinctive theological systems. In Hermopolis, the Ogdoad of 8 primordial deities represented pre-creation chaos. In Memphis, the creator god Ptah brought the world into existence through intelligent speech. In Heliopolis, Atum emerged from primordial waters to generate the first divine pairs. In Thebes, Amun represented the hidden force behind all creation. Each city strove to position its local deity at the cosmic center, developing sophisticated theological arguments for their god's primacy, while simultaneously acknowledging the broader pantheon. These regional variations created potential theological conflicts that Egyptian priests resolved through several sophisticated intellectual strategies. The most important was syncretism, the merging of deities with similar functions or attributes into composite forms. Rather than competing, gods with similar domains could be combined. Amun of Thebes and Ra of Heliopolis merged as Amun-Ra. Ptah of Memphis and Sokar of the necropolis became Ptah-Sokar, while Hathor of Dendera assimilated aspects of numerous local goddesses. These syncretistic combinations weren't seen as eliminating the original deities, but as revealing deeper connections between divine manifestations. Another resolution strategy involved familial incorporation, where local gods were described as children, spouses, or aspects of nationally recognized deities. A locally important goddess might be identified as a daughter of Ra or a manifestation of Isis, connecting the regional cult to national mythology while preserving its distinctive character. Similarly, local divine triads often paralleled the national pattern of father-mother-child, like Osiris, Isis, Horus, creating structural parallels between regional and national religious systems. Egyptian theological texts explicitly acknowledge these regional variations, using the concept of theological geography. Gods were understood to manifest differently in different locations, with particular cities hosting the deity's primary manifestation. Religious texts might specify Hathor, Lady of Dendera, or Horus of Edfu, to indicate specific local manifestations with their distinctive attributes and mythologies. This sophisticated approach allowed Egyptians to maintain both the unity of divine personalities across regions and the special relationship between deities and their cult centers. This religious diversity extended to conceptions of the afterlife, which varied significantly by region and historical period. In Old Kingdom pyramid texts, the royal afterlife centered on ascension to the northern circumpolar stars that never set below the horizon. In Middle Kingdom coffin texts, underworld journeys through the Duat gained prominence. New Kingdom funerary books developed elaborate maps of otherworld geography that the deceased needed to navigate. These weren't contradictory systems, but complementary understandings of post-mortem existence that could be selectively emphasized according to regional traditions and historical circumstances. Beyond regional Egyptian variations, foreign religious influences periodically entered Egyptian mythology, especially in border regions and during periods of international contact. In the Eastern Delta, Canaanite deities like Baal, Anat, and Astarte were incorporated into Egyptian worship, sometimes identified with or married to Egyptian counterparts. The Canaanite storm god Baal was associated with Seth, while the warrior goddess Anat became Seth's consort in some traditions. These foreign deities weren't simply imported wholesale, but transformed through Egyptianization, given Egyptian iconography, integrated into existing mythological frameworks, and adapted to Egyptian ritual patterns. During the New Kingdom, when Egypt controlled territories stretching into the Near East, foreign gods received official recognition while being subordinated to Egyptian cosmic hierarchy. The pharaoh Amenhotep III built a temple to the Canaanite goddess Astarte in Memphis, but depicted her as serving the Egyptian gods. The Nubian god Dadan was incorporated into Egyptian religion, but reinterpreted as an aspect of Horus. This pattern of adoption and adaptation allowed Egyptian religion to absorb foreign elements while maintaining its distinctive character and claims to cosmic primacy. Periods of foreign rule over Egypt produced particularly interesting religious developments. When the Hyksos, a Semitic people, controlled northern Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period, they adopted Egyptian religious forms while elevating their storm god, associated with Seth, to prominence. Later, Persian rulers presented themselves as traditional pharaohs, fulfilling Egyptian cosmic roles, despite maintaining their Zoroastrian beliefs. Most sophisticated were the Ptolemaic Greeks, who created hybrid deities like Serapis, combining Osiris and Apis with Greek Hades and Zeus to bridge Greek and Egyptian religious traditions. Throughout Egyptian history, these religious variations generated periodic attempts at theological systematization. The priests of Heliopolis organized diverse creator gods into generational sequences, positioning local deities within the framework of the Great Ennead. Theban priests later elevated Amun to transcendent status, while acknowledging other gods as his manifestations. During the New Kingdom, solar theology attempted to unify diverse traditions by describing all gods as aspects of the sun god. These theological projects never eliminated diversity, but created intellectual frameworks that could accommodate regional variations within coherent cosmic systems. The most radical attempt at religious unification came during Akhenaten's reign, circa 1353 to 1336 BCE, when this revolutionary pharaoh suppressed traditional cults in favor of exclusive worship of the Aten, the visible solar disk. Rejecting the rich mythological tradition and diverse pantheon, Akhenaten attempted to establish a radically simplified religion centered on the royal family's relationship with the sun. This experiment failed quickly after his death, with traditional cults rapidly restored, demonstrating how deeply embedded religious diversity was in Egyptian culture and how resistant it proved to imposed uniformity. What makes Egyptian religious diversity particularly remarkable is how it maintained fundamental theological continuity despite these variations. Across regions and historical periods, certain core concepts persisted: the cosmos emerging from chaos through divine agency, Ma'at as the principle of cosmic order, the cyclical nature of existence, and the possibility of post-mortem transformation into divine status. Regional traditions elaborated these concepts differently, but operated within a shared religious framework that supported both local expression and national cohesion. Egyptian religion thus achieved a remarkable balance between unity and diversity, establishing sufficient common ground for social cohesion while allowing for regional expression and historical evolution. Its capacity to incorporate foreign elements while maintaining distinctive Egyptian character enabled cultural longevity across changing historical circumstances. Rather than representing theological confusion, Egyptian religious diversity reflected a sophisticated intellectual approach that recognized how divine reality could manifest differently across space and time while maintaining essential coherence. A religious pluralism that valued both particular expressions and universal patterns within a complex mythological framework. For nearly 3,000 years, Egyptian mythology provided a remarkably stable framework for understanding existence, guiding one of history's longest-lasting civilizations through changing historical circumstances while maintaining essential cultural continuity. Yet even this enduring mythological system eventually faced decline, transformation, and apparent extinction. The story of how Egyptian mythology faded, yet paradoxically survived through cultural transmission and modern rediscovery, provides the final chapter in this epic mythological tradition, a tradition that continues to influence contemporary imagination, despite the millennia separating us from its original practitioners. The decline of Egyptian mythology occurred gradually over centuries, rather than through sudden collapse. During the late period, when Egypt faced repeated foreign invasions and political instability, traditional religion intensified rather than weakened. Archaic forms were revived, ancient texts recopied, and temple construction continued with renewed emphasis on historical authenticity. This archaizing trend represented a cultural response to external threats. By emphasizing their distinctive religious traditions, Egyptians maintained cultural identity even when political independence faltered. The Ptolemaic period following Alexander's conquest introduced new complexities. Greek rulers positioned themselves as traditional pharaohs, adopting Egyptian royal regalia and religious roles while simultaneously introducing Hellenic cultural elements. The resulting religious landscape featured both traditional Egyptian cults and innovative hybrid forms like the god Serapis, deliberately created to appeal to both Egyptian and Greek sensibilities. Major temples like those at Edfu, Dendera, and Philae were constructed or expanded during this period, their walls covered with traditional mythological scenes despite their relatively recent dates. Roman rule, beginning in 30 BCE, initially maintained this policy of religious respect, with emperors depicted on temple walls in pharaonic regalia performing traditional rites. Existing temples remained active religious centers, and Egyptian cults like that of Isis spread throughout the Roman Empire, demonstrating the continued vitality of Egyptian religious concepts, even as their homeland came under foreign domination. Egyptian priests maintained their traditional knowledge, hieroglyphic writing continued in religious contexts, and core mythological concepts remained intact despite increasing external pressures. The decisive challenge to traditional Egyptian religion came not from political changes, but from the spread of Christianity. By the 3rd century CE, Christian communities had established significant presence in Egypt, particularly in Alexandria and other urban centers. The new monotheistic faith directly challenged core Egyptian religious concepts, rejecting the worship of multiple deities, denouncing animal-headed gods as demonic, and offering a linear rather than cyclical view of time and salvation. Unlike previous foreign religious influences that had been incorporated into Egyptian frameworks, Christianity positioned itself as exclusively true, requiring the rejection of traditional practices. As Christianity gained imperial support in the 4th century CE, active suppression of traditional Egyptian religion intensified. In 391 CE, Emperor Theodosius I issued an edict prohibiting pagan worship throughout the Roman Empire. The Serapeum of Alexandria, a major temple complex, was destroyed by Christian mobs that same year, symbolizing the changing religious landscape. Temples were abandoned, converted to churches, or dismantled for building materials. Priests lost their state support and social status, while traditional religious knowledge became increasingly marginalized. The final outpost of traditional Egyptian religion stood at the southern border, on the island of Philae, near the first cataract of the Nile. Protected partly by its remote location and by agreements with Nubian tribes who continued to worship Isis, this temple remained active until approximately 550 CE, when Emperor Justinian finally ordered its closure. With this act, Institutional worship of the Egyptian gods officially ended after more than 3 millennia of continuous practice, an extraordinary religious longevity matched by few other traditions in human history. Yet the formal end of temple worship didn't immediately erase Egyptian mythological concepts from popular consciousness. Folk practices incorporating elements of traditional religion persisted in rural areas for centuries, often blended with Christian elements. Coptic magical texts from the 6th to 8th centuries CE continued to invoke ancient deities alongside Christian figures, demonstrating how Egyptian concepts of magical efficacy survived the institutional transition. Even as Christianity became Egypt's dominant religion, cultural memory preserved aspects of traditional mythology through festivals that maintained their ancient timing while receiving Christian interpretation. The most significant transmission of Egyptian mythological elements occurred through Hermeticism, a philosophical religious tradition that emerged in Greco-Roman Egypt, claiming descent from the wisdom of Thoth, identified with Greek Hermes, hence Hermetic. Texts like the Corpus Hermeticum preserved transformed aspects of Egyptian theological concepts, particularly regarding cosmic order, divine knowledge, and magical efficacy. These writings later influenced Renaissance European thought, ensuring that certain Egyptian concepts, albeit in highly modified form, continued influencing Western intellectual traditions long after hieroglyphics became unreadable. A more direct but misunderstood transmission occurred through classical authors like Plutarch, Diodorus Siculus, and Iamblichus, whose accounts of Egyptian religion preserved important mythological narratives, but interpreted them through Greek philosophical frameworks. Plutarch's On Isis and Osiris provided the most complete surviving account of this central Egyptian myth, but infused it with Platonic concepts foreign to original Egyptian understanding. These Hellenized interpretations became the primary source of knowledge about Egyptian mythology for Western thinkers until the 19th century, creating persistent misunderstandings that continue influencing popular conceptions. The decisive break in Egyptian mythological transmission came with the loss of hieroglyphic literacy. As traditional priesthoods disappeared, the ability to read hieroglyphics and consequently access original Egyptian religious texts vanished. The last dated hieroglyphic inscription comes from 394 CE, the last demotic from 452 CE. Without the ability to read original sources, direct knowledge of Egyptian mythology became inaccessible even to Egyptians themselves, who increasingly viewed the mysterious symbols on ancient monuments as magical rather than linguistic signs. For over a millennium, hieroglyphics remained unreadable, and Egyptian mythology existed primarily through classical second-hand accounts and increasingly fantastical medieval interpretations. Renaissance scholars became fascinated with hieroglyphics, but misunderstood them as purely symbolic rather than phonetic writing, creating elaborate but entirely incorrect translations based on symbolic guesswork. Egyptian mythology was remembered but profoundly misunderstood, reduced to fragmentary concepts divorced from their original context and meaning. The rediscovery of authentic Egyptian mythology began with Napoleon's Egyptian expedition, 1798 to 1801, which included scores of scientists and scholars who systematically documented Egyptian monuments. Their findings, published in the monumental Description de l'Égypte, reintroduced Europe to Egypt's architectural and artistic achievements, while stimulating renewed interest in deciphering hieroglyphics. This scholarly attention culminated in Jean-François Champollion's successful decipherment, using the Rosetta Stone in 1822, reopening access to original Egyptian texts after 15 centuries of silence. As hieroglyphic translation advanced throughout the 19th century, authentic Egyptian religious texts became accessible for the first time since late antiquity. Pyramid texts, coffin texts, and the Book of the Dead revealed mythological concepts far more complex and sophisticated than those preserved in classical accounts. Temple inscriptions provided theological depth previously unknown, while narrative papyri recovered from tomb assemblages restored lost mythological episodes. Gradually, scholarly understanding of Egyptian mythology transformed from a collection of exotic anecdotes to recognition of a profound religious system expressing complex theological and cosmological concepts. This scholarly rediscovery coincided with broader cultural phenomena that brought Egyptian concepts into popular consciousness. The archaeological rediscovery of ancient Egypt, particularly the spectacular find of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, generated widespread fascination with Egyptian aesthetics and symbols. Western esoteric movements, like theosophy and occult societies, claimed connection to supposed Egyptian wisdom, while early science fiction and fantasy literature frequently incorporated Egyptian mythological elements. These popular interpretations often bore little resemblance to authentic Egyptian concepts, but ensured Egyptian imagery remained present in modern imagination. Contemporary popular culture continues to be saturated with Egyptian mythological elements, from museum exhibitions that attract millions of visitors to films, novels, and games that incorporate, often heavily modified, Egyptian deities and concepts. These modern interpretations typically simplify and distort original Egyptian understanding, yet they keep core mythological narratives circulating within contemporary consciousness. The visual distinctiveness of Egyptian religious imagery, animal-headed gods, hieroglyphic writing, pyramidal structures, ensures its continued recognition even as its original meanings are often lost. Academic understanding of Egyptian mythology, meanwhile, has developed increasing sophistication, with scholarly debates now focusing on nuanced questions of theological development, regional variations, and the relationship between elite and popular religious concepts. Archaeological discoveries continue providing new perspectives, while applying anthropological and comparative religious methodologies to existing material yields fresh insights. The digital preservation and analysis of Egyptian religious texts make these sources increasingly accessible to scholars worldwide, enabling more comprehensive understanding than ever before. What explains the continued fascination with Egyptian mythology across such vast chronological and cultural distances? Unlike some ancient religious systems that seem entirely alien to modern sensibilities, Egyptian mythology addresses universal human concerns in particularly vivid and compelling ways. Its focus on renewal and regeneration, its optimistic view of posthumous existence, its integration of cosmic and ethical concerns, and its vivid visual expression of abstract concepts continue resonating with contemporary humans, facing many of the same fundamental questions about existence, mortality, and meaning. Egyptian mythology thus occupies a paradoxical position in contemporary culture, simultaneously dead as a living religious tradition, yet strikingly alive in cultural memory and imagination. The gods no longer receive offerings in dedicated temples. Hierophantic priesthoods no longer perform daily rituals, and no community structures its calendar around traditional Egyptian festivals. Yet elements of this mythology permeate contemporary consciousness through museum displays, popular media, and scholarly discourse, ensuring that deities once worshipped along the Nile continue existing in human awareness millennia after their original devotees passed into history. This cultural afterlife seems oddly appropriate for a mythological system so focused on posthumous existence and cyclical renewal. like the scarab beetle pushing the solar disk across the sky. Egyptian mythology has undergone its own form of rebirth, transformed from living religious tradition to cultural memory, from inaccessible mystery to object of scholarly study, from forgotten wisdom to source of artistic inspiration. In this continued presence, despite institutional extinction, Egyptian mythology demonstrates its own version of the eternal return it so powerfully expressed, a testament to the enduring human capacity to preserve, transform, and revitalize meaningful symbolic systems across the boundaries of time and cultural chain. Our journey through Egyptian mythology has traversed a vast landscape of divine beings, cosmic dramas, profound concepts, and enduring cultural achievements. From the primordial waters of Nun to the judgment hall of Osiris, from Ra's solar bark to the fertile banks of the Nile, we have explored a mythological system of remarkable depth and subtlety that sustained one of history's longest-lasting civilizations through more than 3,000 years of cultural evolution. As we conclude this exploration, certain fundamental patterns emerge that reveal why this ancient symbolic system continues to fascinate us across millennia of historical distance. Perhaps most distinctive about Egyptian mythology was its profound optimism regarding existence itself. Unlike mythological systems that viewed creation as flawed or life as suffering, Egyptian thought celebrated the fundamental goodness of the ordered cosmos. Creation represented triumph over chaos rather than fall from perfection. Physical embodiment wasn't spiritual imprisonment, but the natural condition of existence. Even death itself wasn't final, but a transformative passage toward continued life in new form. This life-affirming quality permeated Egyptian culture from monumental architecture to daily practices, creating a civilization that invested enormous resources in celebrating and perpetuating existence beyond natural boundaries. This optimism operated within a characteristically Egyptian framework, emphasizing balance and complementarity rather than absolute opposition. Where other traditions might position good and evil as irreconcilable opposites, Egyptian thought recognized the necessary tension between order and chaos, seeing both as essential cosmic principles requiring proper relationship rather than total victory of one over the other. The sun required darkness to regenerate. The fertile land needed the desert beyond its borders, and even seeming opposites like life and death revealed themselves as complementary phases in larger cycles of existence. This nuanced perspective created a theological sophistication capable of addressing existence's complexity without reducing it to simplistic moral binaries. Egyptian mythology demonstrated remarkable capacity for both continuity and adaptation across changing historical circumstances. Core concepts established in pre-dynastic times remained recognizable into the Roman period, while specific expressions evolved to address new cultural contexts. This delicate balance between conservation and innovation allowed Egyptian civilization to maintain cultural coherence across enormous time spans, while adapting to changing political, social, and intellectual conditions. The mythology was neither rigidly fixed nor chaotically reinvented, but organically developed within established frameworks, demonstrating how symbolic systems can evolve while maintaining essential identity. The Egyptian mythological world was characterized by multiplicity within unity, diverse perspectives and expressions operating within overarching cosmic patterns. Regional variations, theological schools, and historical developments created numerous interpretations of divine realities. Yet these weren't experienced as contradictory, but as complementary perspectives on truths too profound for singular expression. This intellectual approach created space for both popular devotion and sophisticated theological reflection within the same religious framework, allowing Egyptian mythology to simultaneously address cosmological questions and practical concerns across diverse social contexts. For all its apparent exoticism to modernize, Egyptian mythology addressed fundamentally human questions that remain relevant across cultural and temporal boundaries. How did the ordered world emerge from chaos? What cosmic patterns govern existence? How should humans relate to divine powers? What happens after death? How can we reconcile order and disruption, cycle and change, individual action and cosmic patterns? These essential questions receive distinctive Egyptian answers, expressed through culturally specific imagery. Yet the underlying concerns remain recognizable to contemporary humans, still grappling with mortality, meaning, and our place within larger patterns of existence. The visual distinctiveness of Egyptian mythological expression, animal-headed deities, hieroglyphic writing, monumental architecture, has ensured its continued recognition in cultural memory, despite the extinction of its original religious practice. This powerful visual language communicated complex theological concepts through immediately recognizable symbolic forms, creating a mythological system particularly well-suited for transmission through artistic representation. Even viewers unfamiliar with Egyptian theology instantly recognize its distinctive aesthetic, which continues influencing contemporary visual culture from museum exhibitions to popular entertainment. At its core, Egyptian mythology expressed profound awareness of existence as process, rather than fixed state, dynamic patterns of becoming, rather than static being. Creation wasn't a completed event, but required continual maintenance against entropic forces. Divine beings weren't unchanging entities, but fluid manifestations capable of transformation and combination. Humans weren't finished creations, but beings in process toward posthumous divine status. This process orientation created a mythological system exceptionally attuned to natural patterns of growth, decline, and renewal observable in the Egyptian environment. From the Nile's annual cycle to celestial movements to human development, the enduring appeal of Egyptian mythology stems partly from its remarkable balance between accessibility and mystery. Its vivid imagery and dramatic narratives provide immediate points of entry for even casual engagement, while its theological sophistication rewards deeper exploration with increasingly profound insights. The visual impact of a falcon-headed god or golden-winged goddess captures immediate attention. Yet behind these striking images lie complex cosmological concepts that have engaged scholarly analysis for centuries. This layered approachability allows Egyptian mythology to simultaneously function as popular cultural reference and subject of serious philosophical investigation. Perhaps most significantly, Egyptian mythology created a comprehensive framework integrating cosmic, social, and personal dimensions of existence into a coherent whole. The same concepts that explained universal patterns also guided social institutions and personal conduct, creating seamless connection between cosmic order and individual experience. The king, maintaining Ma'at through proper governance, paralleled the sun, God maintaining cosmic order through his daily journey, which in turn paralleled individuals maintaining proper relationships through ethical conduct. This integration of macro and micro scales created a mythological system where personal actions carried cosmic significance, while universal patterns provided models for human behavior. After thousands of years and dramatic cultural transformations, we can no longer access Egyptian mythology as its original practitioners experienced it. The living tradition has been severed by time, linguistic shifts, religious changes, and cultural discontinuity. Yet something essential remains accessible through careful study of surviving texts and monuments, offering glimpses of a remarkably sophisticated approach to existence that developed along the Nile over millennia of intellectual evolution. This mythological system wasn't primitive superstition, but a complex symbolic framework for understanding and engaging with reality that continues offering insights despite its historical distance. As modern humans navigate our own existential challenges, environmental crisis, technological transformation, social fragmentation, and spiritual uncertainty, the Egyptian mythological perspective offers valuable alternative patterns of thought. Its emphasis on cyclical renewal rather than linear progress, its recognition of necessary complementarity between apparent opposites, its integration of material and spiritual dimensions of existence, and its profound appreciation for continuity amid change provide conceptual resources for reimagining our relationship with time, nature, and cosmic patterns. While we cannot simply adopt ancient Egyptian perspectives in modern contexts, we can learn from their distinctive approach to perennial human questions. The gods of Egypt may no longer receive offerings in dedicated temples, but they continue existing in human consciousness, perpetuated through scholarly study, artistic representation, and cultural memory. This persistence across millennia suggests something essential about these symbolic expressions of cosmic forces and human experience, something that transcends their specific cultural context to address fundamental patterns of existence that remain relevant despite changed circumstances. Like the phoenix that the Egyptians called the Bennu bird, their mythology has undergone its own form of death and regeneration, transformed yet recognizable across the great distance of time. In the Egyptian understanding, to speak the name of the deceased was to help them continue existing beyond physical death. As we have spoken the names of Osiris and Isis, Ra and Hathor, Thoth and Anubis throughout this exploration, we have participated in this ancient practice of remembrance that defeats final extinction. Though their temples have fallen and their priesthoods dispersed, the gods of Egypt remain present in human awareness, testament to both the transience of specific religious institutions and the enduring power of mythological symbolism to express profound truths about existence that continue resonating across the boundaries of time, language, and cultural change.